3 years ago, if somebody said, "Hey, Paul, would you like to come to this Bold Fusion, this great, largest gathering of young leaders in Cincinnati, and speak with them?" I go, "Absolutely." I'm very excited about just kind of hanging out with the next generation of leaders and learning from each other. But if they said, and the topic, by the way, is love as an element of leadership, I go, I'm not sure what to do with that, And I think that as a coach, I talk often with my clients about everything from authenticity to empathy to caring deeply about your employees. But the word love never kind of fit into that conversation. And I'm not sure why, but sometimes I wonder if it's maybe just the vocabulary around it. We've made a mess of the word love, if you think about it. It's almost like we were kind of throwing spaghetti around sometimes. Not spaghetti, confetti. Well, either one works. But the idea that the word that we use to try to capture our devotion to the most precious, intimate relationships in our lives, the people we call our loved ones, it's the same word we use to talk about our affection for a barbecued brisket. That's a stretch. Now, of course, there's probably some barbecue fans out there going, "That's not a stretch at all." There's some pretty good barbecue out there. But over the last few years as a coach, I've been paying attention to, and I have a lot of discussions with my clients about who's mattered to you. Who's really had the impact on your life? Who just comes to mind as somebody who's really made a difference to your life? It's never been the smartest person in the room. It's never been this person was so strategic. It's never been this person could knock it out in terms of hitting operationalizing their KPI goals, right? It was always something deeper. This person stuck up for me. This person gave me a shot. This person took time with me. And that's kind of what I'll explore today. Because frankly, I can't wait to be here. I couldn't wait to be here today because I've been on a little bit of a journey myself about understanding what's this thing called love? How does it fit into leadership? And what does it really mean for us, not only the rest of today, but as we try to incorporate this idea of love into our leadership. And to do that, I want to go back to the beginning, the real beginning, to our childhood. And I'll start. It's a longer memory for me. But I remember when I was 3 or 4 years old, I was sitting cross-legged on a braided rug in our living room in our house in New Jersey with my sister. My parents were sitting up on the left. And we were Sunday night, and we were watching, all looking into the corner, where I had a Philco black and white TV in a wooden cabinet with Lassie on, okay? So I know I just dated myself, or maybe I carbon dated myself. If you know what Lassie was, the family out in the country, they had a dog, stuff happened, dog rescued him, the whole thing situation. At least in suburban America, everybody watched Lassie. And we all talked about it the next day. We always wondered what was going to happen next. It was kind of basically our Game of Thrones. The only difference being in the last episode, the ending was better in Lassie. But, so that's, and when I was sitting there in the living room, there was a sound outside, this kind of musical sound, which was The Good Humor Man. I'm going to date myself again, which was basically food truck meets Dairy Queen. It's so vivid to me. My dad reached into his pocket, dug out a quarter, flipped it to me, and said, "Go get you and your sister an ice cream cone." Well, you want to talk about a rite of passage. Here I am 3 or 4 years old with this quarter walking all the way out to the street, from my first retail transaction. This was really cool stuff. I've had people say, "Well, that gave you an early appreciation for money." I said, "No, it gave me an early appreciation for ice cream." So I came back to the house brandishing these 2 ice cream cones, and it was like a rite of passage. This was like, my father sent out the boy and I came back a man, right? So, that's kind of your reality when you're that age. Would you rather I use that?
Your mic is upside down. That way I had a hard time hearing you.
Okay. What do you want me to do there? Flip it around? There we go.
All right, that's better.
You good?
Yeah, you want to use this too?
Not really.
Okay, all right.
That's what it was, getting all that feedback. Okay, well, that's my story. Let's do yours, okay? So I'd like you to close your eyes. And by the way, I'll close my eyes so you don't freak out that somebody's staring at you in the darkness, okay? But I'd like you to go back into your memory bank to a early childhood memory where you were with a caring adult. This could have been your parents, your grandparents, your foster parents, somebody else. I'd like to just give you a few seconds to kind of play that back in your mind a little bit. Okay, got it? Now, with your eyes still closed, see if you can reflect on, remember, or maybe even imagine how you felt in that moment. What's the word you would put to that? Okay, good. So what the heck does childhood memories have to do with leadership and love? Okay. Well, here's what I'd like you to think about. I believe, going back to our childhood, there's three basic needs we had, even going back to as infants. I mean, other than diapers and Honey Nut Cheerios, okay, for those of you who have kids. I'm talking about emotional needs, okay? The first one is I believe we want to be proud of ourselves or have somebody who's important to us be proud of us. Hey, mommy and daddy, look at me up on the diving board, right? Or look what I made at school today. Or, hey, I know how to draw with crayons. You want to see the wall in my bedroom, which is a true story. That sense of pride, accomplishment. The second is, I believe we want to be safe. There's a reason why we tuck our kids into bed at night and check for the monsters under the bed or sit with them when there's lightning outside. But there's also kind of a safety that I think it's like a social safety. It's just being part of a tribe, being part of the family, a sense of home and place that says, I'm welcome here, I belong here, I can be myself here. The third bucket, and our focus today, is love. And I think as a child, that's pretty easy to understand what that means, is to be deeply loved, unconditionally loved, but it's also the sense that mom and dad, or whoever that is in our life, would do anything for us. So pride, safety, and love. And my premise is that even though these are deep childhood needs, no matter how old we get, they never go away. I believe it's just baked into the human spirit that we still, even as adults and through our adult lives, we still want to be proud of ourselves. I'm not talking about the pride goes before the fall stuff, okay? I'm talking about pride as a fuel in our life that is just a simple, rational recognition of who we are as people, how we're growing, our curiosity and exploration that takes us someplace different each time, and we simply recognize that growth. The safety certainly means physical safety, but go back to my definition of that social safety aspect of it, and particularly in the workplace. It's this idea of feeling like we're home, and we're part of a tribe, and we're welcome, and we're not subject to recrimination. We belong here. Our ideas and expressions can be accepted. That sense of safety. And then we have this third thing called love. And that's where it kind of gets a little weird sometimes. Like, what is that? How do we explain that in a workplace setting? Frankly, I wrestled with that myself. I went back to a definition of love 2,000 years ago, and was basically this: there's no greater love than to give your life for your friends. There's no greater love than to give your life for your friends. I've heard that for decades, and honestly, I didn't get it. I was kind of uncomfortable with it. Like, that sounds kind of limited. What I mean, just for your friends? I mean, what about everybody? Let me suggest something. If we walk out of here today, and I know we're not on a hill, but just imagine, stick with me. If we go home or come out of here and there's a baby stroller careening down the street, out of control, and there's a mother frantically chasing it, there's no way she's going to get it, and that baby stroller is heading for an intersection, busy intersection. If you were nearby, I think it's a pretty safe bet that you would run out and grab that stroller or push it out of the way, even if it meant that you would get hit by a car. Now, there might be a few that would kind of grab their phones and get a video for Instagram, but I'm talking about people who are in the human race, okay? But we see this all the time, don't we? The blind person that falls off the railway platform or the subway, somebody jumps down the tracks and grabs back at the last second, a child or somebody drowning in a pool. We don't sit there and go, well, let me check on my life insurance policy. Maybe I better text my family and let them know I'm not going to come home. No, we just do it. It's just instinctive. We're willing to give up our life for people we don't know. But here's what I actually think is the harder part, is to give of our life for the people who are right in front of us today. To give up or give of our life for people who are in our lives today. And I think this applies particularly to the workplace setting. I had a definition of love that came from one of our panelists today, Chuck Mingo, my brother by a different mother. And it was basically this. He says, the highest form of love is to impart worth to people, even at, or I would say especially at, a cost to ourselves. To impart worth to people, even at, or especially at, a cost to ourselves. And I had the most interesting experience. I kind of cracked eggs on this a while ago, about 3 years ago. It finally really kind of came clear to me. I was actually going out to Scottsdale, Arizona for a coaching conference in late October. And the reason you go to Scottsdale in late October is supposed to be warm and sunny and get to escape the rain and the fog and the cold weather here in Cincinnati. So I go to Scottsdale, and guess what? It's rainy and cloudy and cold. So I'm stuck in the hotel room on Sunday, and I'm doing some reading or fiddling around or whatever, and I had a football game on, and of course I'm in Arizona, so it's the Arizona Cardinals, in this case against the Seattle Seahawks. Well, I'm kind of watching it, but not really watching it. There wasn't much to watch anyway, because there was no touchdowns, no big plays, a couple of field goals on each side, and the game ended in a tie. Well, then I started to pay attention, because what happens is, if I understand the NFL playoff rules, one team gets the ball on the other team's 25-yard line. They have 4 downs to make a touchdown and win sudden death, or they can kick a field goal and the other team has a shot on the other side of the field. So Arizona Cardinals, 3 downs, couldn't move the ball at all. They bring out their hot shot place kicker. I mean, this guy has just rocked every record in his few years with the Arizona Cardinals. This is going to be easy. Well, you want to talk about putting the ugly in the word choke. He didn't even come close to the goalpost with his kick. 25 yards. That's like, mixed metaphors. That's a gimme putt. Okay. So then Seattle's going, okay, this is easy. They go down the other side of the field, 3 downs, can't get anywhere, no problem. Bring out their field goal kicker. He bounces it off the upright. I mean, just unbelievable that both kickers missed 25-yard field goals. Game ended in a tie. So now I'm really paying attention. They go to the locker room. They interview the Arizona Cardinals coach. They basically said, hey, how about your hot shot kicker missing the field goal? Here's what he said. He said, you're supposed to make those. This isn't high school. This is the NFL. You're supposed to make those. Cut to the Seattle Seahawks locker room. They asked the coach, so what do you think about your guy missing the field goal and the chance to win the game? Here's what he said. He said, our guys kicked a lot of field goals to get us where we are today. In fact, he kicked 2 today. He missed one. That's okay. He'll be back. He's our guy. We love him. It's not hard to imagine who showed up at practice on Tuesday in pride, safety, and love, and who ended up showing up in shame. They probably both worked at it, but I've always believed that when people figure out you don't care about them, they'll return the favor. But I thought was more interesting, go back to my definition of love is to impart worth to people, even at a cost to yourself. I was kind of paying attention to the coach. What was the Arizona Cardinals coach willing to give up for his player to feel worth in that moment? Nothing. He just sat there and said, I'm the head coach. I'm a tough guy. I got my standards. My players know that. That's the deal. The Seattle Seahawks coach, he gave it all up. In that moment, he didn't care that he was a tough coach or anything, or what anybody thought about him. He had a wounded player there, embarrassed that they missed the game-winning field goal, and he wanted to give him worth, even at a cost to himself. I thought that was just the most remarkable experience of what I'm talking about. I'd like to show some hands. How many of you right now lead a team? and keep your hands up, how many of you lead the whole organization? All right, and how many of you want to or hope to be leading a team or an organization? That's a fair number of hands. You know, for you to do that job, to have the chops to lead a team, whatever your area of expertise is, you know, project management, technology, marketing, finance, you name it, you got to have that stuff. But I would suggest there's something much deeper. If you really want to have the impact and if you really want to create what we're talking about today, to have this environment where love is infused in that team, in that organization, to lead to some really exceptional performance, I think we have to figure out this thing called love. I figured it out I didn't figure it out, but I reflect on it. My story goes back 35 years. I was a young kind of hotshot manager of what was then an $18 billion business, and I was out in California. The headquarters was in Connecticut. Somebody came up with the bright idea of promoting me and bringing me to Connecticut. Well, I don't know what came over them, because I showed up looking like I just walked off the beach of Malibu, you know, I had a beard and everything. I had to buy a suit just to fit into Connecticut. But my job, one of my jobs, was to do the board presentations for the CEO. I guess I just was kind of good at that stuff and give it to the young guy. And back then, that was not an easy task, because you know, we didn't have PowerPoint or Keynote or software or presentation applications back then. Here's how we did it. I'm going to date myself badly here. We actually had a pad of paper, and we would draw the visuals that we needed for the board presentation, tear that off, send it to an outside design agency who would just mysteriously create some slides, and we would get a deck of 35 millimeter slides back a few days later. And by the way, if you ever heard the term pitch deck or sales deck, right there, that's where it comes from, okay? So you can imagine you don't exactly make a lot of mistakes in a situation like that. Well, I did. The day before the board presentation, they had a run-through. And I wasn't there in the room at the time, but the word got to me pretty quickly that somehow when the CEO was going through these slides, there was a slide missing. It wasn't earnings per share, but it was something pretty close. I just forgot it. My boss, Ray, had gone through the whole list of things. I just forgot it. You know, and I'll tell you, I could hear his voice, the CEO's voice, echoing down the hallway. I've never heard my name juxtaposed with so many expletives in all my life. You would have thought my middle name began with an F. So, and I was mortified. I mean, actually, I just went from being, you know, promising young manager to even worse than a kick me sign. I think I would have had a sign on my back saying, but he forgot the CEO's board slide, you know. I went home that day. I was afraid to tell my wife, I think I'm going to get fired. I mean, I really screwed up. I mean, we even had dinner, and I was going to scrape the leftovers into a Tupperware and put them in the freezer. I might need it in a few days when I'm unemployed, you know. I go to work the next day. I'm just like slow motion. This is not going to be good. You know, out of the parking garage, into the building, you know, to the fate that awaited me. And I was absolutely sure when I got to my office, there'd be a note from my boss, Ray, sitting there saying, Paul, we need to see you in my office. I'd go in there, and he'd be sitting nervously behind his desk. The death nurse from HR would be there, along with my severance package. You know how that works. Instead, nothing. I mean, Ray even came by with his coffee cup, as he did almost every morning, kind of made the rounds, chit-chatted with me a little bit. I saw the CEO later in the day. Hey, Paul, how you doing? Fine. Hey, I cheated death. This is awesome. That's all that ever happened. 25 years later, I'm sitting on the porch with another guy who worked with Ray, worked for Ray in the same group. He was a few years ahead of me, so he retired early. And we're sitting there in rocking chairs. And he had a cigar, which I guess he's allowed to have. He's retired now. I hate cigars. And we're sharing stories. You know how it is. And I share this story. And I finish up by saying, man, I should have been fired for that one. And he goes, you want to know why you weren't? I said, yeah. And he says, because that afternoon, Ray went into the CEO's office and said that it was he, Ray, who had forgotten to tell you to put that slide in the deck. I never knew that. You know, Ray's still around. Certainly don't talk much anymore, but you know, I can't imagine how I could ever help Ray. But if Ray called me today and said, Paul, I need your help on something, I'd be at his doorstep the next day. So I'm cracking eggs here. I think that there's a lot that we need to do to lead organizations and lead teams and to continue to grow. Well, I'll tell you, I'm not so sure my generation got it right, and the generation before I don't think got it right, but your generation, as I look at this room, has an incredible opportunity to take this thing called love, not as a sentiment, but as something of substance that is deep within the human spirit, and figure that out and make that part of one of the essential qualities you have as a leader. And the question, I guess, I was told, you know, I asked a question and shut up. I'm now going to do that. There's two questions I'd like to ask you to consider today. One is, what do you want to give up? What do you want to give? What is it about you that you can offer to people to bring worth to them? Even in the moment, what do your people need from you? What can you give? And the other question is, what do you want to give up? It might be time, convenience, reputation, I don't know. What do you want to give? What do you want to give up? We figure that out. I think we're going to really understand why love matters so much more in leadership than we ever knew. Thank you.